All right. Okay. So have you started recording, Ollie?
No,
Yeah.
all good to go.
It says recording has started.
Yep,
So did you start that or did I?
I did that one.
Oh,
Yeah.
brilliant. Okay, so we're starting recording. Yeah, great. So we're on yeah, by attending you consent to being recorded. Okay, so that's fine. Recording has started. Okay, Ollie. So we're on part 3 of our videos now, which is the last bit really, where in the first couple of we've talked about the issues around sexual orientation, gender identity, and so on. We've also talked about some experiences in relationship to that. And we're on to the final bit, really, which is now thinking about professional supervisors and sort of challenging issues of queerness and have
Yeah.
people more, how have you more generally seen supervisors and health professionals around these issues? And really, we're putting those hats on now and trying to think for them on the kinds of things that they're thinking, well, how do I approach this then? What do I need? What are my skills? And so on.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts around that to begin with?
So I remember from part 2 that I was talking about a kind of aversion, I think it would be appropriate word. More apprehension actually to people working with people they perceive to have needs that the professional can't meet. For example, I remember sharing in something along the lines of, it's been a while now, in the second part, which was, people referring people who identify as homosexual to me as a counsellor because I am also a person who identifies as homosexual when it had nothing to do with their therapy needs. They were humans who would benefit from some compassion and some support. But it reminds me then of in supervisionary kind of relationships I've had with my supervisees. Reminds me of two things. One's more personal, I suppose, and more interesting in between the relationship with myself and my supervisee. I've noticed, and then one's more of a general kind of reflection based off the experiences that I've had as a supervisor. So I'll do the latter first, actually, the more general.
Okay.
Where I've seen supervisors and health professionals as well, kind of navigating around understanding queerness. One thing I've noticed, you get some people who, perhaps like myself, are quite well versed in the language that is used when talking around, as you can see, I'm picking my words now, and that's used when talking around queerness and people of any sort of difference, not just queerness, but any diversity, really. People really seem to want to get it right, and they're quite careful about upsetting people, which I think is understandable, and helpful. However, sometimes it can err too far to the overly cautious, and that's a general thing I've seen. Sometimes some people won't want to address someone's sexual orientation or their relationship with someone, or may not want to ask questions about that individual's relationships out of fear of upsetting them or offending them, perhaps. So, to concrete that with some context, it reminds me of a supervisee that I have currently on at the moment. They'd come to me with a client who they were querying. They were like, I think they might be gay, but I haven't asked. And I was like, okay, it's interesting. Let's unpick that a second. Not because everyone, you don't have to ask everyone, it may not be relevant, but in this context it was, because they were talking about their relationship and that the individual that the supervisee was querying may be in a homosexual relationship or a same-sex relationship, and was expressing they felt they were the victim of abuse in the relationship, and provided kind of what the ins and outs around and what their experience was. But the counsellor who I was supervisee, hadn't really noticed until we went through it in supervision that they were apprehensive to ask specific questions about the nature of their relationship, which was actually quite necessary to best safeguard the individual who was expressing that they were a victim of abuse. It would have helped to identify appropriate services. It could have helped to identify specifically what that need is, and if there's any particular risk in terms of if there's a physical violence risk, it would be somebody who is more physically stronger than the client. They didn't really explore the reality of the setting. They explored like the I think, you know, the symptoms, I suppose, the person's experiencing, so heightened anxiety and like the psychological effects of being in that relationship. But they didn't get much of the facts around the relationship. And then didn't also book a follow-up with the person. Usually I would encourage my staff to have another appointment if they were not sure if that's the whole thing. Are they safe? Is it complete? This counsellor had the last session with them, and signposted them and referred them onwards to a specialist like a domestic violence service, which was appropriate for what they were presenting. So they never managed to get that further information either. They also couldn't hand that information over to the relevant service. But I remember that they told me that they requested the other service ask on their, for the betterment of the client. And nothing really came from it since then. I'm not saying this is a story that needs any there's no like, ramifications from that. Ideally, somebody wouldn't be apprehensive. But in supervision, we unpicked it, and they said to me they didn't want to upset this person. They were worried the person was already quite upset and feeling judged and feeling anxious and feeling low, that they didn't want to contribute to that, which allowed us to talk about collusion really well, the concepts like that. And we did focus on what might have been the blocks for the counsellor too, the supervisee in within that, and the blocks that they kind of identified were wanting to get it right actually for the person, so they were averted to go anywhere near the concept that they might upset someone. They weren't willing to be vulnerable themselves to meet that vulnerable person.
So what, that it does touch into the earlier themes of our conversation, isn't it? People treading on eggshells and for fear of upsetting, and actually that becomes a bit of an obstacle really, because we need to, and in any form of counselling, I'd say there is a sort of balance, isn't there, of sort of feelings, as it were, and exploring those areas of tricky emotion.
It feels like it lets the elephant in the room
versus the chronology.
And stay in the room, we're not really acknowledging it. There's like this thing that we don't want to talk about. If you get linking back to the previous kind of interviews we had, usually that's a shame-based emotion that's being inert in the other person. Maybe transference, counter-transference now between supervisee and this client in this scenario. Maybe there's something, a felt sense of awkwardness in the room, and not knowing what to do with that, not knowing how to name that awkwardness. So we just want to ignore it and just hope it's not happening, which can probably feel like the path of least resistance for the supervisee in this, for the counsellor in this. We don't want to go there. It feels awkward. But actually, it can be really liberating for someone to be asked explicitly, how is your relationship? What is the person that you are in a relationship with? How would you identify your relationship, with this person? And asking even direct questions around someone's gender identity, and how would you like me to address you? What pronouns would you like me to use? When talking about someone's relationship, how would you like me to address the other person in your relationship? What word would you like me to use? Some people like partner, some people like boyfriend, some people like more specific ones or less specific ones, and that's fine. But it's about being invited in to share your felt sense of what is comfortable for you. And I think without doing that, we just miss the opportunity to make people feel validated and heard in their difference. It's easy to kind of just assume that everyone fits into those pigeonhole boxes that society generates, when very rarely people do. And we are missing the trick.
I think also, I totally agree with that. I think also it's there is something about the general sort of act of counselling, as it were, bigger than that, which is around that sort of what I call the 1 foot in, 1 foot out part of empathy. So there's about getting close to the feelings and understanding how the person feels in their shoes, but there's also the other bit, which is the sort of reality check. So if you think about like a maypole and the ribbons going round the maypole, well, what's actually happening here? What is physically actually happening here, in the whatever it is. So in other words, we're looking at the issues that we've been talking about, well, sort of who are you with, and asking those kinds of questions, so we've got the kind of concrete maypole, or the wooden maypole, and then we've got the feelings going round it of various kinds, So we've got a real concrete understanding of the reality of whatever that situation is, whether it's a queer relationship, whether it's something else that's going on,
it's interesting,
an incestuous relationship, you know.
Oh, exactly. The more you know, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm about to say the more like undesirable kind of aspects of human experience that people can be quite quick to hide. And it reminds me, that analogy is really helpful, actually. The maple one, it reminded me of, you know, you've either got to get stuck in and grab the colourful ribbon, and you've got to join in the dance to complete the ritual, almost, the experience. To get the fullest out of it. And it's kind of like engaging with clients and being willing to do that with them. And taking time to do it, I suppose, is another thing my brain's also saying is it's all well and good doing this, but again, inviting in balance in how we talk to people. It may be, I'm sure that most practitioners or all practitioners would be, I'd like to think that they have that felt sense of what would be appropriate right now and what would work right now. And actually, sometimes we might want to ask someone a direct question around their queer relationship, it could be, or their gender identity, or what's going on for them, or in terms of their felt sense of difference. But sometimes it does take a tentative touch. But there's something in the way that we communicate it. So what I'm trying to say is avoidance, I don't think it's always helpful. But it might be worth like attending to the fact that, I'm noticing, I would like to ask you about your relationship. I also don't want to put any pressure on you to talk about that. I'm just noticing that about myself, you know. What do you think? And offering it back and being vulnerable and being willing to get it wrong, if that's the right way of saying it. Being willing to just go, I don't really know all the answers here. Because I don't know what your relationship's like right now. I do need more information, that kind of idea. But
relating to what you said about shame as well, how I'm picking up is, like, for example, again, if I was talking with someone who's had abuse or trauma, and they may feel a sense of shame. But the worst thing you can do really is avoid it in the psychotherapy scenario, actually, 100%. is to come up to it somehow and acknowledge that something's happened, and that's just a massive relief, isn't it, then, to the individual, that something's getting acknowledged, and then the conversation can unfold.
I'm glad you brought that concept in, because that's always something that I think is really important to talk about. I'll keep the side thought is, I was at a BACP conference last week, and and there was a speaker about domestic violence and working with victims of domestic violence. This woman had an 18-year career working with perpetrators of violence as well as victims of violence, really well versed. And she was likening the experience exactly as you were saying then, which is sometimes with these people who are the victims of domestic abuse or violence, they may have learned this as a very normalized behavior through their early experiences and their early childhood. So to them, they know something's happened and something's wrong, but they're not sure exactly what is wrong or why it might be not so, not so healthy for them to have experienced or to be living in. She shared an analogy of one woman who had gotten so used to eating out of a dog bowl for dinner that she didn't realize it was odd anymore. She told her in confidence as a counselor, I had my dinner out of the dog bowl. And she was like, what? And it's about shame-based emotions. And my point is not so much go into the experience, because that's a very harrowing experience. That's not going to go into that too much. But going into the acknowledgement of this, the counsellor there also shared, you have to be willing to go, and you did the same action, which is go and hold with the person this difficulty. And usually when it's trauma, it might feel challenging still, because trauma, I'm doing this a lot. It's like, whoa, it's a big thing. But it might feel challenging to address trauma, but it also might feel like it makes more sense for people, because we can go, you don't deserve bad things to happen to you. This bad thing happened to you. I'm assuming you may feel this way. Is that true? How do you feel? Let's go through the motions and name it. But actually, what we're talking about is more slight, and it's similar to trauma, I think, in its presentation. And it's very similar to the way that humans experience ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences. The internalization of shame, the internalization of violence, the internalization of negativity and chaos that we've experienced about not just directly to us, but in systems around us, in families around us, in society around us, the narrative we absorb, then specifically about queerness, this idea of, is it okay or not okay? Am I okay? Are people going to like me? Do I need to hide me? You develop trauma style responses to relationships with people. You may want to just placate people to survive, and it becomes very much that survival in this harsh world where, as usually this is happening when you're a kid, you're a kid going into adolescence, into your teenage years, trying to make it work, very rarely having the opportunity to have astute kind of self-awareness. So you're just trying to get through life. You're just trying to make it work, blend in, get through, and survive. And I suppose not everybody has that experience. Where I had a very similar experience to that, so I'm very passionate about that kind of surviving through kind of experience. Not everyone does, but my awareness working in the field, especially supporting lots of queer individuals, is that the majority do get through and survive. And to do that, I've heard, if you think thematically, people, themes of people forgetting themselves or losing sight of themselves. They come say, I don't know who I am anymore. I thought I knew who I was going to be, and I'm not that person. So a real shape to the core foundation of someone's identity, which then, comes out in coping behaviors. It might come out in lying to people. It might come out in what might be perceived as dishonesty. It might be perceived as someone being awkward or anxious or selfish, and whatever way the judgment's cast on it, that individual's normally judging themselves already for being the person they are. So then, to really round this point off, if we then go into a session with someone, even as a supervisor with our supervisee, about a client who's having this experience, if we aren't willing as supervisors or as supervisees to name, not even if we know what the thing is, just name that we know something is off. Something feels odd. Has something happened to you, or how do you feel about yourself? And really engaging with that kind of deficit of the self and the internalized shame that we might experience. That can be the transformative piece of work, just in itself. Being heard, validated, and allowed to go, I think I'm different than everyone else, and I think I've been different my whole life, and I'm terrified of that. Where if we aren't willing to put our finger on the button, as it were, we might just go around the houses and never really get to the bottom of why this person might be struggling. I hope that made sense.
It does. Well, you're talking about collusion there in that sort of going round and round kind of thing, whether it's sort of conscious or unconscious. So I wanted to come back to sort of transference and countertransference, actually, and the use of that in terms of understanding what's going on, because we've touched into shame, where yes, we can of course say, well, you shouldn't be ashamed of your difference. The world has stuff to learn. It's the world's problem, not yours. But the point is that the socialization is such that there's a normal, isn't there? And then there's sort of
so we're born to fit. We're born to stand out, but we all try to blend in. It's nuts.
So that's so we got that on the one hand. We sort of go in and out of shame and difference and everything like that, and then the other bit is like, okay, so when we're working with people, having I guess we might encourage then, from what you sort of said earlier, and I'm thinking about myself too, is like what am I feeling with this person, the transference, the countertransference, the sort of what am I noticing in our relationship that feels important to talk about.
And also, just what I might add on to the end of that sentence is what feels important to talk about, and how might I talk about it with this person in a way that feels safe.
Because it's going to be taboo, or it'll be the unsayable, or it'll be slightly
something
out
that
of
I have maybe not said to anyone before. If I'm thinking about it as a practitioner, but also as a supervisor, we might have an experience with a supervisee that we may be picking up on a feeling that we are noticing within ourselves that may not have been there before the session or the supervision session. And it might be helpful to, I suppose, own that, if that makes sense, and be accountable for our own experiences without putting it on the other person. So you don't want to say to them, you're holding back something here, or why aren't you telling me everything? And very, very like, it's always telling someone off, kind of that attitude. It might be helpful to get I'm noticing that when we're talking about this client of yours, that I'm I'm noticing it might be a felt sense, a somatic kind of experience. I'm rubbing my belly. It might be like an anxious kind of nervousness in your stomach. I don't know. It might be like a heavier kind of feeling in your head. Is what I normally get when I'm feeling a bit confused. I kind of want to do this. I go, huh? But owning that and saying, yeah, oh, when you say that, I'm feeling this. I wonder if that makes sense to you, or if you might have felt that. It could be helpful with supervisors to help the supervisees, sorry, to help them to get a bit more attuned to the transference, counter-transference. Then I also think when working with someone, directly, if you're working with anyone, not just queer people, so anyone really, because transference and counter-transference can happen anywhere. But specifically in this context, if you are, working with something that feels taboo and difficult to talk about, it might be worth, owning that as well and saying, I'm just really noticing when we're talking about your relationship, I want to know more, but I also feel worried. I don't want to ask you more. I don't want to upset you. I'm just finding that quite interesting for me. I wonder what you think of that, perhaps, or something along the lines of, it seems hard to get to know more about your relationship. I wonder if you want to talk about your relationship with me. I wonder if you want to share any information with me, and they can have the choice then to say no.
And I'm thinking, as group supervisor, as we're talking, in my own experience, sort of sometimes thinking I've got to broach the unspeakable here, or the unsayable, something's not getting said in the group.
That's more challenge, I think, the more people that are involved.
And once I spot it in the role of group supervisor, I realise it needs to be said. I may take it to supervision first, or I may just offer it in the moment. And what you've got there is, if you're offering something out, you've also got, you're kind of quite exposed as the group supervisor, because you might be offering something where everyone goes, oh, what a load of crap is that, sort of thing. What do you mean, and you're you're the weird one, and you're the one who's like out
really
sync.
Well put, because that's counter-transference, really, isn't it? You then become the weird one because you're talking about the weird thing that no one else is willing to talk about. And so you put your neck out there, and put yourself out there to be vulnerable, because like you said, they could turn around and go, what a load of boop, I don't need to we worry about that, when actually it could be really integral to something.
I mean, it's always, I think, working with transfer and counter is always sort of a challenge, and hopefully, the group will be able to work that out, even if there's an initial feeling of that. If this relationship is strong enough in the group, then one should be able to sort of roll that out. But I guess as supervisors, what we're asking for is a certain amount of courage from the supervisor to be able to offer something that might put them a bit on the line, but that may be useful.
Discomfort, potential discomfort that comes with that is, I'm vulnerable, I'm out on the line. I've said this thing, I've shone a light into the darker corner of the room. That's right. And I've got to sit and own that. Where it can feel challenging. It may not be
it's not always welcome.
It's not always welcome, is it? And I was having a thought then as well, thinking about the supervisee within that group. I was casting my mind there, thinking if I was, because I've had this experience, and this is the more personal, go back to the slide, which is the more personal experience that I've had in supervision. Not just within our health board, but also within other external training, other external group supervision I've accessed. It's very common that I'm the only young gay man. I'm saying young for now, but I'm 30 soon.
Yeah, I know.
But I'm usually one of the younger, I'll say
yes,
now. But a gay man, who working in the field of psychotherapy. And usually, I don't want to generalize in a stereotypical way, but I think it's fairly known that usually colleagues of mine would be female, or identifying as female individuals, perhaps a little bit older than I am. I'm trying to be very polite and diplomatic here. But essentially, you got middle-aged women who are abundant in the field, and I'm just noticing sometimes it can be. It's not a shaming experience. I want to really clarify that, what I'm trying to put across here. But I can find myself judging myself and trying to blend in more unless I'm quite aware of it. Especially if it's in a newer group. I'm kind of wanting to fit in to the group dynamics. I'm thinking then, like, group psychology, in group, out group. I want to be part of the in group. I want to be accepted. I want to be part of it and seen and valued. for what I can bring. And very rarely it actually explicitly happens, but commonly it's kind of internalized thought or feeling, which is being treated as the token gay person. I get questioned about oh, do you know, one I normally get is if I go to CPD and I'm a counsellor and I'm gay, I go CPD places, supervision groups perhaps, or like a group, a kind of environment. And so I go, oh, do you know Ryan? And I'm like, who? And they're like, oh, he's also gay, he lives in Cardiff. I'm like, no, I don't know. Don't know
like
Ryan.
that,
Why would I? I don't know a lot, And it's the same thing. That's a more familiar. But my point is, it's assumptions. Assumptions can be really challenging. And actually, as a supervisee in that group, sometimes they might really understand what you're putting across. That vulnerability that the supervisor has come and said, there's something in here. I want to unpick this. Everyone goes, no, rubbish. It might be that one person's really feeling and understanding that, but the timing doesn't feel right, or they may not be able to kind of join you in that vulnerability. So that's, I think, in groups is an interesting dynamic as well to be aware of, is how does the group see and appreciate difference? Do we see people as experts and kind of token people for their as a representative, or do we see them as people?
Well, that makes me think of now, Olly, obviously me talking to you. And what that's so sort of what thoughts, I mean, as we've discussed before, it's I picked on a few colleagues to talk about different areas of diversity, but it is only one colleague, but so from a large group, however percentage of the population we want to say, sort of so I don't know if you, but just to acknowledge that here and just to invite you to comment on that. The other word that I wanted to get to was, you've used the word blend in a few times. And I'm interested in that because the image that I get that goes with that is, like colours. And if you try and get a colour to blend in, everything goes horribly grey. Sort of thing. Like the color just becomes a mishmash, and it's like I used to do my art.
I'm with you, and that makes you think about the fact that grey is not very exciting, and it's a very dull. In my mind, it's very dull kind of. Oh, you don't. It's like, oh, it's a grayscale. Life's in grey. Life's not in colour.
Beautiful colour, doesn't it? You loses the original colour, which might have been pink or orange.
The uniqueness of the colour as well in itself, and the vibrancy can be lost when we blend in. So I'm already with you on that point. But before I get to that one, I will address the first point you made, which was acknowledging that speaking with yourself here, I am the token gay person to some extent, but on a personal level, I don't feel that with you, and I wouldn't have agreed to do it if I thought that's where you were coming from. I just know I felt a sense in me that I just know that's not where you're coming from. You're coming from support, allyship, and genuine curiosity, and I think that's really that in itself shows. I think you could tell in the way that we would communicate, if I were to, you'd pick up on bias and anything like that, and I don't think that's there. And then the other part of it is a bit more evangelical of me, I think, a bit more ego-driven, which goes, well, if I'm not going to do it and get the word out there, how are we going to help support other people who want to train and develop? So I really am willing to put myself out there and be seen. So but worth acknowledging. So thank you.
To make yourself more visible. In one sense, more visible than most. So that's invisibility, visibility, because I often talk about that in groups. And so what we're talking about is making oneself more visible.
More visible. And I am standing up and being more visible in the same way that links beautifully into blending in and standing out. I don't want to blend in and become a grayscale colour. In within the health board, within the systems, I'm quite loud, I suppose, in a very nice way, but loud and active within the systems that I work within. I like to assume, not because I need people to know me, I just know that I'm quite busy. So I think people know of me, or have spoken with me, or emailed me, or have some awareness of me. I do the courses and things with yourself, and I do other things, XYZ. So I've become more familiar with not blending in. So going back to share my philosophy behind this, okay, it's actually based off of RuPaul, which is, again, one of my idols. So I won't go down gushing about how amazing I think RuPaul is. That's another conversation for another day. But just to summarize, RuPaul is a famous drag queen who was born as male and denoted male at birth, identifies as male outside of drag, but in drag identifies as female and is a powerhouse. And one thing she says on her program, which is RuPaul's Drag Race, which is all about drag queens, is men dressing up as women, being fabulous and winning prizes. Okay. And one thing RuPaul says to them is, amongst lots of other things, is stop feeling the need to blend in. You were born to stand out.
Right.
And this is your time to stand out.
Okay.
And I found that inspiring on a personal level. And my understanding of it is the idea of blending in is something that we do to survive. But like you said, with colours, you blend the colours, you lose the vibrancy, you lose the uniqueness, you lose the in this analogy, the crayon that's what I got in my head. The crayon that is designed to deliver this color, when you use it and you blend it, you lose the beauty that was intended, that was originally there. And it's similar concept with humans, with ourselves. When we're becoming invisible, or if we're blending in, we lose that unique spark, that thing that we all have that no one else has. We all have a uniqueness about us. For the people who might have grown up in systems which make them feel oppressed, they may not recognize that, or really may not be able to access what that uniqueness is. What's the point of not blending in? Because what am I bringing? I'm just putting myself out there for pain. And it might feel as though there's more pain coming in than there is worth for it. So I can understand why people want to blend in. It links to evolutionary psychology, survival of the fittest. It links to that kind of the mammalian part of our brain that wants to make connections and be resourced and successful that way, and successfully reproduce and pass our genes on, from evolutionary psychology. It makes sense to me why people blend in, but emotionally and for fulfillment and like self-actualization, it's quite counterintuitive. Actually, we lose sight of who we are and what we do, to the point where we just we start to survive. We start to form informed living here. We're trying to get through, not be seen, not be kicked out. We just want to blend in, and we just want to, like you said, be invisible. Very much so, like that woman who was in an abusive relationship, eating out of a dog bowl instead of leaving and telling the other person. I'm not sure about the feasibility of this mind, but without, in a perfect world, let's say, they could have turned around and said, I'm not dealing with this, I'm worth more than this, and I'm out of here. But to survive, they wanted to blend in with the established rules of the system. In that case, it's the relationship in that small family system. For gay people or queer people growing up, there's multiple systems that are influencing them: family, school, usually, work, society, cultures around that, and they've got subcultures within, like, local organizations, sports clubs, pubs, even venues, groups that you might be part of. And there's so much difference within that. It's easier to not have to navigate your way through. It's easier just to blend in and just try to camouflage through all of it. It's the path of least resistance. But then again, like I said, you're gonna minimize your experience, really.
Well, like you've sort of said, and we've talked about, you've just mentioned there the drag queen.
Yeah.
And which we haven't got in our list. So I'd like to include that, if we can do that off screen. You can post that up on my team for me, Olly, because the drag. What was her name?
RuPaul.
Yeah, how do you spell that?
R-U then Paul, but all one word, RuPaul.
Oh, you Paul, right? RuPaul. Okay. And does she have any sort of YouTube profile or something?
I don't want to. I could absolutely massively nerd out about all the fantastic things that she has. She has Instagram.
Okay.
She's I think she's 60 now, or coming up to her 60s. RuPaul is. So she's never really been that present on social media. She has accounts and everything, but her most successful work is in the master classes that she provides about loving yourself, about your self-esteem and resilience. I'm not sure if they're paid. I've seen a few of them. Can't remember if I paid for them or not now. But so also she has an extensive library of books she's published about self-love and
so we could Google her and find a few resources, is what I'm thinking about there in relation to that. Sounds good. Okay, so yeah, so we've got some recommendations up there from you in relation to that, and just sort of obviously we've had some conversations already, and you've drawn attention to somebody else, and no doubt there are many people, aren't there, that who would have been influential, really. But just from having a couple of the books that you've already recommended to me, we've always been here. Samra Habib, since you and I have talked, I've started to read that, and that's very readable and very enjoyable. A sort of lesbian Muslim woman, and really interesting. Just reading
As you can see,
about it.
me
So
smiling.
thank you.
I'm really glad that
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
started doing that reading. That's
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. And I've got the other one as well, and we've ordered them for the library, which is Travis Alabanza, who you've also said. Yeah. So I haven't read his yet. I'm reading hers first, but yeah. So they feel quite up to date text to me. And then
Yes.
you've got some films. So yeah, just do you want to
Well, I
pick
would
out
add
one or
on to
two of
there
those?
with
Yeah.
on RuPaul. So I found the RuPaul's masterclass. I just quickly Googled in the background. One
Oh,
thing I didn't
great.
share about RuPaul is RuPaul is a black man, so identifies as a
Right.
black man, and as a black
Lovely.
queer person living in America, has massively faced adversity.
Yeah.
RuPaul used to be on the TV in the 90s. He had the RuPaul show. You may be familiar with them once I send you the link, actually, or you might have seen them around. There's a very famous picture of RuPaul dressed in full drag holding Kurt Cobain's baby. With Kurt Cobain and the I think Courtney Love's in the picture too, or the group members of Nirvana, and that went round. Something about the MTV Awards in the 90s. But regardless, the masterclasses, there's a sample on here that you can access for free, and they're 2 hours long, worth of 16 sessions around how to. Anyway, it's RuPaul teaching self-expression and authenticity, how to find inner truth and overcome hardship, gain confidence, live your best life. And I would recommend this for everybody. It doesn't have to just be queer people who can access this. They will most likely benefit from it because of the way that they've experienced society and cultures.
Absolutely.
But like I said in the last interview, I don't know how explicitly I said it, but I'll say it again. I do feel like sometimes people who are assumed typical, who are neurotypical, who are, I'm doing this because no one's truly everything, but who are neurotypical and completely straight and completely one gender. I feel like they might miss out the opportunity to really get to know themselves and the vibrancy that they bring and their uniqueness. And being unique is important. So I think I'd encourage everyone to watch these videos because anyone can get anything from it. But specifically those who are struggling with their self-esteem, it can be transformative, So I'll send you the link after this.
That would be absolutely that sounds like another, well, it's a new discovery for me because I hadn't heard of that. I think the 90s was just outside of my that's my age again, Olly. It's my age. Okay. And I had some recommendations which I think we've already sort of discussed. So again, I don't think there's much more to say about that. I would particularly point to John Boyne, who's an absolutely brilliant Irish writer there, and who's written some excellent sort of novels, and they're pretty up to date, those as well. So
John Boyne, you said?
John Boyne, yeah.
Is he the one? Sorry to go off piece. Is
he
the boy in the striped pajamas?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay, I thought so. I remember his name. I've not read anything else that he's done apart from that. So I will have a look in. I'm assuming the
history of loneliness is perhaps one of his more famous as well. Which is about a priest who sort of colluded to a degree in child sexual abuse. So that was quite. But The Heart's Invisible Furies is a lovely one because it's kind of it sounds angrier than it actually is. It's a good novel. It's just a good read, a good story with a range of different people in there. So yeah.
I love that. More different people, please. The more different people, the better.
Yeah.
So read.
Let me just think now. Have we got anything left? I think we may have reached the end of the slides. 11 of 11. So let me unshare. Let me stop sharing. So so are we sort of towards the end of the conversation for now?
Yeah.
For now. Yeah.
But now, you know, I could talk to like lose my voice about things like this. I'm very privileged. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and share with you my thoughts and my experience, and hopefully some sort of wisdom that's come from that. I've really benefited from doing it as well. It's a nice break from the day-to-day work, but also to get that message out there to help support people when they're working with different people, specifically gay identifying or queer identifying people. So thanks.
Yes, and I feel that, you know, just doing this as a piece of work has given me, you know, I've already, you know, sort of got several more references, books, thoughts. So there's loads that I'm learning from our conversation here, and I don't know how, you know, my fantasy is about 3 people will watch what we've done, but I hope they get something from it, you know, and they'll watch bits, and, you know, maybe sort of play it as they're cooking dinner or something. But I hope that sort of people will get something, you know, will learn. And we you never quite know what people will pick up from either of us in this.
It's very true. And you know, if it gets the message out there about, you know, working with people with difference and can help support people, and if one person that watches it really doesn't bother to me, you know, if anything, you and I doing the process, I think it's been really helpful too for the courses that you'll be developing moving forward too. The course I'm going to help support you with, and the work that we do outside of the work that we do together too. I think it's really helpful all around. So if no one sees it, there's no harm done, really. Is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Really
exactly. Okay. Well, thanks again, Olly. And we know what we're doing following this. We'll review the videos and we'll have a little think about where we're going to put them.
Absolutely. Well, on that, I best make a move. I'm going to grab myself a cup of tea before my 12 o'clock meeting.
Right. Yes. Okay. And thanks again. Soon. And we'll sort of save the videos. Brilliant. Thanks, Olly.
Lovely. Bye now.
Take care now. Bye-bye.